everyone. This is the June 10th, 2021 special call meeting for the Administrative Code. We welcome you here and thank you for being here. This is a discussion part of our meetings today. At the end of this meeting, which ends around 4:30, we will adjourn again or come together again around 5 o'clock for the Franklin County Fiscal Court work session. So we're glad all of you are here that are watching this, and we'll begin. Mr. Sparks, if you would, I'll let you begin because today we're talking about a particular ordinance amending the operation of the Fiscal Court, Chapter 30, purchases and contracts, the Code of Ordinances by adding sections for sole source procurement, federal fund procurement, and effective federal grant purchases disclaimers. Would you want to talk about that, because that's probably a good lead into everything else.
Yeah, let me pull, and I know that is in a separate series of documents, specifically the packet for this afternoon. So let me switch files here with their blazingly fast Wi-Fi over here in the county attorney's office. Do you all have that available to you? What is listed as agenda item 5?
Yep.
Okay, that is a simple but mandatory inclusion. You may recall at the last fiscal court meeting, a question was raised as to whether or not we would be receiving any, quote, guidance for the ARPA funds. Y'all recall that comment? And I told the court that we have received some and would anticipate presentation coming up, because we just got the directive but hadn't received the language. Now we have the language, but it is not in the, it's in the call here because it affects and is related to the code, but it is physically contained in item 5 of the agenda. And what it does is it specifies in cases where you're using federal funds, ARPA or otherwise, and there is a claim that certain items are subject to sole source procurement, the process under which it has to be addressed and the necessary findings. It has nothing to do with the approval of payment ultimately. It has nothing to do with the contracting, etc., but it's how you go about identifying the vendor of those items. And the feds say we got to have it. So it is it is subject to the golden rule. If you're going to take their gold, this is the rule.
That's the golden rule. I've been going by wrong pretense over these years.
Yes, I can't state it any better, and obtain the language from the feds. Tamara's compiled it into the appropriate format that would fit into our codified series of ordinances, and that's what it is. So it needs to be done soon, so we can go and make sure that in the event that if there would be a necessity for a sole source procurement, that the county follows those directives.
Squire Moore.
This won't affect any other procurements, will it? Any other aspects of our code? It won't affect anything else, will it?
Not in any fashion, no, sir. You still have the our current code benchmarks the state procurement level, which is now $30,000. It is still requires the bids to be approved by the court. Still requires the contracts to be approved by the court before entry on whatever item of widgets that you do. And it still requires the court's approval for payment of all bills. So this is just a mechanism. If you're claiming one of two things. If you're claiming a sole source procurement, you have to certify one of those 3 factors under Section 30 or what would be section 30, are present. And for procurement, if you're using federal funds, period, you have to do a debarment certification. That is, the vendor has to certify that they're not prohibited by the federal government, have been debarred from consideration for federal contracts.
Squire Tracy?
Thanks, Judge. Rick, couple questions. You mentioned 30,000. I know the state follows that, but I think the court stayed with 25. Is that accurate?
The court declined to expressly state 20, and the code right now says that it's benchmarked still to the state. So it by implication is 30.
Okay. And then would it also be, would it, can you forward that information in regards, you said that you received from the feds? Can you forward that to us?
This is it. This is what I got from Ann, and then Ann got this language from the feds. This is it.
Okay, well, maybe Ann can forward that for us. Forward that to us. Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
I think you got it. This is,
It's in your packet.
it's in your packet.
And that's what I was saying, Scotty.
Number
It's
5
in
in your
the packet,
packet.
but it's
Squire.
in the info packet. And I don't mean to be yelling. It's in the info packet for the regular fiscal court meeting. It's not separate today, and it's contained in item 5 of the agenda packet.
Okay, I've got 5. Okay.
Yes, that's what the Fed sent. That's the red line. Well, it's red on mine anyway. That's the language that they gave to Ann that was then incorporated for the under the codification process to fit it in.
What would be the difference between this one and what's already required, the requirements of the federal grant law? What's the difference per se?
This is part of it. We did not have a sole source express protocol in the code at all. And so they told her that as a condition of doing these, you have to have that language in your procurement. And this is the resulting language. Frankly, the court's always been, and I've always been extremely sensitive about certifications for sole source, emergencies, et cetera. There has to be a direct nexus between the items. Just because there's an emergency for a pump, for example, doesn't mean you can go out and buy ATVs, or there has to be a nexus. There have been some problems. People view that very broadly. I do not, and I've been very reluctant. Not reluctant, I've just been very, that ain't gonna happen kind of deal. It's not subject to an emergency. It has to be very directly related. But this specifies that you have to have one of 3 findings, and you all are looking at it, so I won't insult you by reading it. It has to be one of those 3 plus the debarment. So if you're going to use, for example, ARPA funds to buy widgets, regardless of its sole source or not, they still have to certify that they've never been prohibited by the feds for federal contracts. And it's like I
How
said,
do we know
it's-
how do we find that kind of information out, Rick? Whether the feds debar, do we have to look everything up before we purchase something? Is that Tamara shaking her head? Yes.
you can do, well, it's one of 2 things. The contractor has to acknowledge, because you can't be responsible for things that you don't know or shouldn't have known in the past.
Amen.
But they have to certify in that contract that they've never been subject to debarment. And it requires the language and the documentation immediately adjacent to the signature line. They even tell you where King Midas is really serious about this stuff. Not only do they tell you what has to be in there, but they tell you what part of the page, and they don't tell you how much distance. It says immediately beside of the signature line.
Okay, no. Squire Sebastian, you've had your hand up. I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you, Judge. Counselor, I just had pulled my administrative code out here, and I'm looking on page 78 of that. And it depending on everybody's pagination, it could be a different page. This was one that I printed off when I first came to the court, and the one that Counselor, you and I've been looking at as we've been working on things all along this past year. When I look under section 4.4 on page 78, procedures, prerequisite to use of negotiated process, a $20,000 figure is actually in here. It doesn't reference the state in any way, state procurement that the county, Franklin County. I mean, that's what I'm finding in the one that I have in front of me.
What section, where are you reading on? Where are you reading on? 'Cause you
I'm reading
switched
on
gears
Page 78, again, it's section 4.4, procedures prerequisite to use of negotiated process. And there's item A, and item A states, the negotiated process may be used instead of advertisement for bids if the amount exceeds $20,000. And the $20,000 is still the same figure as when I came on the court.
So on
Yeah,
page.
that's what I've got as well.
Counselor, I'm sorry, it could be on a different page, maybe if, depending on how it prints.
So on page 79, under section 4.6, the small purchase procedures, which doesn't discuss the negotiation process, but it states in section C that before purchasing supply services at a cost exceeding $5,000, but less than the amount specified by state law for bid purposes. It does have in parentheses $20,000 as of December 2007 as a reference.
Right. Yes, it does. It states 20,000 there again. Or that's the copy. So those were the two places that I found it stated 20,000.
They're different applicability. One of them's small purchase, one of them's bid.
Right.
So that's something we're gonna have to address, but the small purchase one, if you'll read the whole sentence and not, you gotta read the whole sentence. Less than the amount specified by state law, which as of February of 2007 was 20,000. So the amount specified by state law for that purpose now is 30. That's what I was trying to bring it to your all's attention, that is an issue. It doesn't affect this section 5 at all on this, on the sole source procurement. But it does affect how much, specifically on small purchase, you've benchmarked that. You all didn't. This was ages ago, courts ages ago.
Yeah,
Benchmarked that to the state law.
I'm sorry, something I had in mind, Counselor, and I don't know if it's something that we discussed in our many discussions, but I have on my copy, I actually have a line through that language, the amount specified by state law for bid purposes. And then I also have a line through as of 2007. So
I don't think
I
we
had
made it that far, ma'am. At least that on my most recent working notes, I don't know if we made it that far or if that was discussion or whatever.
as I recall, and again, I may recall it improperly, so I will say that to everyone. I thought that when the discussion first came to the court in the first year that I was on the court opted to remain with the $20,000 figure. And
That
the
is correct.
language
It
was
wasn't the small
removed, and
purchase.
maybe I misunderstood that. But
No,
that's
you're
why I
exactly
have not
correct.
crossed through.
That was for the negotiated process. You didn't address the next section. We addressed section 4.4. So that's why I said there's an inconsistency with 4.6. The court rejected the 4.6 negotiated process to 30, but did not address 4.8 or 4.6, pardon me. I don't think that 4.6 has ever been addressed since that was set. I don't recall that ever being addressed, at least in my tenure. That's why I said it was a court some time ago.
I don't
Now,
know. I can say, I just have a lot to say to that line.
living and learning since then, and given the price of goods, et cetera, maybe that's a good time to revisit that and benchmark both of them to state law and call it 30, since you got the oversight of the purchasing anyway. And I know the sheriff had some heartburn and others who've had to make large purchases, cars, et cetera, that it seems like nothing anymore is less than $20,000, much less 30.
Amen. That's for sure.
But that's up to y'all. If that is an inconsistency, and maybe that's why you noted that one on yours, Sherry. It's not made it on my note. We didn't go that far. We started.
Quite possibly. I know we've, circled the wheel on a lot of different things. So
My last one's in section 321.
Yeah, I do have a line through that in my document.
Okay,
That language in 4.6 for whatever that's worth to anyone.
we just didn't get that far, is what it seems like to me.
So I'll, I guess I'll ask a question about, this language being needed. If it's contractual, if it's federal language that has to be in a contract, is there necessarily a need to put this in the code to make it, I guess, more narrowly focused in this area? I don't know
Yes,
the words.
yes, they'd say it has to be in there.
Has to be in our code or has to be in a contract?
Has to be in the code. We don't, that was the problem. We do not have a sole procurement section of our procurement code, was my understanding. And that's where the language came handed down from them. But now you're correct from a way of thinking. It has to be in the contract is correct, but the code mandates what has to be in the contract, and that's mandated by the feds.
But if that's mandated, just to logically take that one more step, if it's mandated by the feds, it will be in the contract. So I'm just wondering
No. Oh, wait, I'm sorry.
if it has to be I'm just wondering about why it needs to be in the code if it's supposed to be in the contract. And so I'm eager to hear what you have to say. I'm just eager.
Because the code says what has to be in the contract. So if that's not in the code, then there's no requirement that it goes in the contract. And then that subjects you to problems with the drawdowns and justification audit purposes for the federal funds.
Yeah, but if the feds mandate it be part of the contract, since contractual arrangement is among numerous parties, two and or more.
No, they wouldn't be involved. It's not a contract with the feds. They're saying that this is contracts between the county and others using these funds.
So it's not for us to have the ability to draw this down, because usually there's some signatory documents that we have to sign in order to draw federal funds down, period. So that's not what this is in regard to. I'm sorry. I just want to make
This is a
about the
collateral to
I
that.
understand. I get the procurement. I think I'm following the procurement part. I just want to make sure any kind of arrangement that we have, does it have to have this kind of language in it to work with the feds, I guess?
Let me say this, Rick, if there's no drawdown, it's already in our back.
I'm saying, I use the word drawdown. That's the wrong phrase.
Okay, that might help me.
They require for the use of those money that we make sure that all contracts subject to this for which payment would be made to have these certifications in there. And they require some kind of ordinance or otherwise that sets forth those requirements. So that way, if there's a contract where you don't have it adjacent, et cetera, then they're going to come back and gig it. So this way it's in there and they say, you've got it in there. It requires that if you sign a contract with Rick's Widget Company, that has to have those certifications and that immediately adjacent as part of the contracting that uses those funds for payment.
So have we been doing this wrong in Franklin County all this time because we've had
Oh,
federal
Lord,
money?
no, ma'am. Don't get all carried away. No, it's
Hey, I'm
it's an
not.
evolving situation that they've handed down the language as these things get sent out. No, ma'am, I don't think anything's been done wrong.
No,
It's just the action.
I guess I didn't mean to state it that way. Since Franklin County has been the beneficiary, let me restate this, of federal funds in the past, earmark and otherwise, would this language not have been applicable in those instances? How's that? Is that better for you?
To the extent that the answer to that is no, because they didn't tell us that's what the language had to be. Now they have.
This is brand new with this. Is it only in the instance of these American Recovery Plan Act funds, or is it all instances?
I'm treating it from this point forward that it's in all aspects that fall under those procurements for which federal grant funds, just out of an abundance of caution, are used to pay for items.
So any federal dollar.
What would be the net effect from this point forward? Yes, ma'am.
So if the federal money comes to the state and then it passes through to us, that would be applicable instance as well, right?
Again, out of a best practices standard, yes, ma'am. I think those should be included. That's websites on there, et cetera, those certifications about debarment, the sole source certifications as a general rule from this point forward. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I tried to put some of these terms in and search just to find if this was something that came from Treasury. And I came up with nothing. So I was just curious, like where the wellspring for the language, which may be helpful, maybe to everybody.
Tell me.
And I'm not sure who would have that information. You may have a counselor or somebody else may have it. Just
Tamara will ask you that.
If bear with me, I'll try to find it.
sure enough, I appreciate that. Thank you.
And receive the guidance from the Department of Justice.
And Ann sent you that Ann sent that in.
Yes. Rick, it's an email
Here we
from Ann dated May 24th.
I was first made aware of this issue from Ann, indicating that the Department of Justice has agreed to give us till September 1 to add language to the administrative code on sole source procurement and create a written policy to check on the federal list of companies not in good standing with federal funds. This will be good for all the federal money we will be dealing with over the next few years. I said, thank you, Ann. I said, yo, Ann, I need some help. You got any suggested language? Because this is federal stuff and I don't screw with federal stuff. I want to do their language, their words, whatever. They want it in Latin, they want it in Mayan. I really don't care, but I want their language. And she sent the exemplar to get it in place prior to the spending of any ARPA money. I said, that's great. We can do that accordingly. And here we are. And that is the language that DOJ sent to Ms. Northcutt.
And we have until, you said when to put it in effect, September 1, is that what you said?
Well, it's on for first reading today.
Yeah, I see that. But again, I'm just trying to make sure I understood all the information that you just passed along. You said until it has to be in there by September 1, right?
And says that from this point forward, receipt of federal funds, and that encompassed ARCUS. So I didn't want to screw it up by waiting. That's why this is kind of out of order. And I'd asked to be incorporated. And that's why Tamara did the work to slide it into that codified section, what would be now section 30 under the codification one. So we don't have any gaps that would allow anything to go wrong in the event there's some necessity in the meantime. This is not something to play with. So that's how that got sent down from on high. I cannot emphasize that enough.
Yeah, that's great. Is that something that maybe we could all just have the out of use, like you said, out of an abundance of caution, that we all have that at our fingertips at some point? I know it's going to, the conversation is in regard to the codification in section 30, which is the full administrative code.
We had to create another section. We had to create a subsection for this because it's not addressed. So yeah.
Yeah, just if Ann has that at the ready.
I mean, I don't understand what you want. You got the language, you got it in there for first reading. What else do you want to talk about? I mean, you can kick the can all you want to. What are we waiting on?
All I just asked if she got like something from DOJ, there may be other information in this directive from DOJ that may be helpful in regard to overall issues with ARPA. I'm not saying this specifically, because usually there's lots of things in those directives that come down. That's all.
No disagreement, but I would strongly recommend that you all proceed with this language immediately. And if you want to delve into the weeds on the rest of it, more power to you, but do not delay on this.
Well, I'm always asking the questions, always trying to read and learn more. You know that.
I think sometimes you got to make the call, Squire. This is the time to make the call, pull the trigger and do it.
Not the point of my question, but thank you.
I wasn't sure what the point is, respectfully, but this needs to be done and don't delay it.
I'll open the floor to others to ask the questions they may have. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tracy. Bye, Tracy.
Thank you, Judge. Judge, if you don't care, could you have, again, I'll ask again, I asked once, can you have her just forward that stuff to us so we can look over it and read it? Because we're getting asked every day about what's going on. So it's just information is all we're trying to get.
I'm sorry, what stuff are you asking to be?
The information that she received from the feds in regards to doing all this, what she forwarded to Rick. Can you just have her forward that information to us?
I think you got it in section 5.
So that she got all this
That
red
that
letters.
in
like
red
this
is
right here,
what
that's all
Rick,
she got?
Rick,
That's all I'm
did you
asking.
not copy that from what she sent you? Is that what she sent
I
you?
copied it exactly from what she sent.
That-
She forwarded it to me. and
Yes.
I copied it exactly.
Yes, and now you got it there.
I'll send it to y'all right now, whatever y'all want to do.
Well, I think they've got it. Tamara's got it in.
Well, I mean, I'll give you something to think about. I'm talking.
Thank you.
I'll forward it, no problem. I'll send it to everybody right now. There's a whole string. That's all I got. Give me just a second, but it's on for first reading today.
Thanks, Rick.
You're welcome, sir. Give me just a second, and as you all continue your discussion, I'll be sending it to everybody.
All right,
Very good.
I guess we move to the next one. Lambert, I'll go to you first. We'll just kind of go around the room. We've got anything in particular that you want to address?
Not this time.
Okay, thank you, Squire. Squire Muller.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
caught off guard that we're gonna deal with this right now with everything else we've
here.
got received, I think, so, at this point, no, I'm gonna look back through my notes, because it's been a year or so since we kind of looked at this, so, yeah. Just trying to study on all of our book work for tonight, so at this time, no.
Squire, we'll go with Squire Tracy, Sebastian, and then JW, you're gonna be last, if that's okay with you.
Oh, before you go any further or too deep on it, I did send an email to everybody, which was the email string, including the language that was incorporated from Ann, as well as her recommendation. You all should have it available.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick. Squire Tracy, is there another item on the minute of the administrative code that you want to address? Okay, hang on one second. While you're looking, Squire Tracy, Squire Muller we're asked to come back to him.
One of the, thank you, Judge. One of the notes that I have from the last time we talked about this a year ago, whatever, was about the how we deal with CBD oil and things like that. Did that ever get addressed? I guess I'm asking counsel on that. Because I know that's kind of a moving target.
We don't know. It's never been addressed. I know that it has come on situations, incremental ones, where the question on the zero tolerance policy comes through, and factually, those don't appear to be subject to the testing protocols because of the amount so low. And then you've got problems on the workplace safety, federal laws, et cetera. Legal states aren't testing for cannabis or cannabis derivative material, and states like Kentucky that have legalized CBD or CBD derivatives, whether they be hemp derived or otherwise, or hemp derived directly or indirectly, don't seem to be subject to the testing thresholds. So I don't know if that's a problem waiting to happen or a problem that has happened and it's just not been detected, but I'm not aware of any clashes
As you know,
in terms of test, in terms of positive tests.
We have
for
not heard
CBD.
from Betty Jo. Betty Jo could be. Betty Jo, are you on? Do you want to answer that question? Betty Jo, are you on?
Yes, I'm on.
Okay, Squire Muller asked the question, have you heard any situations that would deem us to look at CBD oil?
I have heard actually, with Forward Edge and what I've been told so far, that there's not enough to detect exactly what Rick Sparks said. There's not enough to detect that. That's all I know so far. We haven't had an incident with that yet, so I haven't brought anything to the county attorney with it. I believe we will in the future, in my opinion. But as of right now, with Forward Edge, they said that there's not enough. What, I don't know what word to use. It's not enough THC in it to have a positive test, but it's not 100% guaranteed right now.
Betty, explain what Forward Edge is.
Forward Edge does our drug screens for the county employees.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rick, do you concur? Have anything else to add to that?
Just like I said, Judge, as far as I know, it was brought up at one point because there was a threshold, and at that time the Hemp Act had passed in 2019 into 20. The question arose, but in a practical format, it's never reared its head again because it's never come up as a problem because of the testing thresholds and the type of things that are tested for.
Okay. All right.
So I don't know if you want to create, I would not advise to address a non-existent problem. I'd just be stabbing in the dark.
Squire Tracy, you ready to go back to your turn?
Thanks, Judge. Yeah, just to clarify, I know we had spoke about page 78 and 79, 44 and 46. With the notes that I have, what I think where we got messed up on it, Rick, was in the code changes, the recommendations before they've been grouped together. So in the notes that I have, it said staying at 20 as well. So hopefully that helps clarify that.
I think the court ought to seriously consider one way or the other. And given the change in the last year, hell, I'd hate to think how much it is lumber board foot right now. Anyway, you may want to consider benchmarking it all the way across to state law. There's advantages both sides, but you got to stay fluid, and circumstances have radically changed in the last 3 years when that was declined to expressly raise it in the bid process section.
Thanks.
So now's a good time to do it. And if you want to just benchmark it, you can make it. It's an easy one across the board to do. And again, it doesn't change the payment. It doesn't change the authorization. You still have to come to court to do all of those things. You still have the oversights, et cetera. Even with this item 5 of your main packet, none of those factors change. And I know the court is rightfully concerned about oversight and transparency, et cetera. So those still are maintained.
So you do think that it's necessary that we do that, even though it says based on the state?
One place it does, one place it doesn't.
For consistency, yes, sir. That's why I think you ought to benchmark it to one or the other. And given the changes, water down previous, the concerns are still there. I mean, the pros and cons are still there, but the reality of the finances and the economy's changed. So yes, I'd ask the court to consider benchmarking it so you've got a consistent amount across the board.
What section is that in? On what page, Amber?
One of the ones that Sherry and I have been working on, we call it page
I know 79 says
78.
benchmarks it with the
Yeah.
state.
If you're looking
78 as well,
if you're
Judge,
looking at the
4.4.
modified version, the paginations are different, but the ones that we've been working on together has been 78, 79.
78.
Mine, it says 79 at the bottom, section C, with the state law.
Yeah, but
And y'all, there's some other
78
things,
down at the bottom section.
just to let the court know, and I think this review is helpful. There's a lot of them, a lot of other ones. And I say a lot, I haven't calculated it, but they range from tweaking the mundane to significant things for discussion that we still have to put pen to paper, which I did not do, with this special meeting. And I hope you didn't expect me to do it. But it's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it comprehensive, but there's some things that need to be firmly addressed. There's the lingering specter of the problem of hiring employees at a given amount and other employees who don't have the same money pay, but they get new employees. Lambert, you can take over here. Then the new employees leapfrog the existing employees because of salary changes, the way they came in. That's a gruesome issue.
Okay, but let's go back to this procurement part and get the verbiage correct, and then we can go to that next item. Because if we don't, we'll just continue to wallow in the mud here. So
Judge.
so tell me here, one says specified by state law for bid purposes. Is that what you're recommending be said in the previous page in section A, where it says amount exceeds 20,000?
I
So
think
you want it to be with the state?
it needs to be consistent.
I would do them both for the state law.
Okay.
So then that's an easy fix, because we'll just have to, again, we'll clean that up with first reading once we go through all these, and I can put them all in at one point, except for item 5, which again is critical timing. We can just state there that it is the amount specified by state law, which is X at a certain date, and then you're good to go. If that be the pleasure of the body.
Okay. All right. So that would be one that we would change the verbiage to. Tambra, I guess you know how to do that, where we're going with that. Okay, so that will be one that we'll bring before you for a vote when we can get that done for a first reading, I guess. Is that right? You do a first reading of that? Okay, now the next one, Rick, you brought up, and I know Squire Moore's been has discussed this several times as well about pay grades.
Y'all, we've debated it, and Terry, I'll punt to you on this one, because we've debated it along with Betty Jo time and time again on a way to cure that. I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to fix it. Still don't know how to fix it. Any suggestions? Greatly appreciate it.
Well, I think the last time we talked about it, we talked about not raising the starting pay every year. Like when we give the 2% or whatever we give, don't give it to the starting pay. That until fiscal court says to give it to the starting pay. No, until it.
Are you talking about within the classification?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, the bottom stays until we say it goes up.
Okay.
So if it's $12 an hour, and everybody else gets 2% for, whatever.
The classification itself stays the way it is, because originally we added the cost of living always into the classification.
Right.
And you're yeah, I remember one,
I think
maybe
we
last
voted
time you
on it.
said maybe every 2 years or something.
Well,
like
we
that.
would look at it every 2 to 3 years or something.
Rick, what's your thought about that? And Betty Jo, I'd like to hear your thoughts too.
I don't really have one, Judge. That's whatever you all want. It's just a cumbersome way it's just a very cumbersome
It is.
write-up. It's just very cumbersome. And I appreciate any assistance and on even the draft. It's just very cumbersome. I've struggled with it for years.
Betty, I asked you, do you have a response to that?
Yes, Squire Moore was correct. In 2019, when we reviewed this, I don't believe there was a vote on it because there was no change in the admin code. But I believe the court, with Moore's request, wanted every other year to change the CPI. I will say that we don't want to get behind like we did before. The whole reason the county never had a compensation plan until it was created in 2015. And we come to find out we was way behind other counties. So I just want to caution, if you don't ever want to change that CPI, we're going to get behind again, and our comp scale again is going to be way behind surrounding counties. Also, we're currently losing, I'll just say, park employees. We've lost 2 more this week due to the city park employees is paying a whole lot more money, unfortunately. So, you know, I don't have a complete fix, but I mean, every other year would be fine. But
So Betty, let me ask you this question. This is just out of the blue. If the court said, okay, in 2021, we're recommending, and the budget's recommending a 2% cost of living. And the court said, okay, in 2021, 2022, we will not add the cost of living within the classification codes. And then next year, out of the blue, the court agrees to a 1% cost of living. So then how does that affect? How would that work? Is that what we're trying to accomplish? Or what if the next year the court recommends a 3% cost of living? And then that's the year you take it, and there's a 3% cost of living. So I'm throwing those 2 scenarios out because have we defeated what we were trying to do? Have we?
No, because everybody would get that.
Well, everybody gets it no matter what it is, right?
Not if somebody, a empty job that's not filled yet wouldn't raise, but filled positions would.
Yeah, I
And
thought
so-
we only did it for the position
So in
that
the
was filled
odd-
at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes,
I
I thought we voted on it. We may not have.
Also.
But if we did it on odd and even years, at least you wouldn't have starters making the same money as someone that's been there for 5 years. That's the issue.
That's correct, because the classification scheme sometimes increases at a greater rate due to necessity, due to the new employee, due to whatever other factor, at a greater salary than others brought in because it didn't keep up with them with CPIs, et cetera, over time. Long-term employees tend to take the brunt of that.
So what would be your request, Squiremore?
To raise the floor on even years or odd, whichever, and not on the other.
Okay, on even years, the cost, so instead of raising the floor, we have the cost of living would apply to the classification codes on even number of years.
Yeah.
And not on odd years.
Yes. Or vice versa. I don't care
Well,
where
you
we
might as well
start,
just
but
do it
yeah.
On even years. Leave it out this year, do it next year.
But then you're going to creating a side perverse result that you're still going to have certain categories of employees who get cost of living every year and others don't.
Well, I think what,
Who doesn't get it?
If you track it like that, every employee except elected officials, because elected officials get their cost of living regardless.
Yeah. Or
So
not.
that's really kind of not fair to other employees.
All the employees are getting raises. It's people that aren't here yet that are not getting raises.
that's what he's saying. It's on, yeah, because,
Yeah, I'm not saying it.
yeah,
Oh, okay. So I misunderstood
unfilled positions.
Unfilled positions.
it. As I'm taking notes, when you said that about the increase, you were talking about COLA increases as to the classification scheme for positions that are unfilled.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. My apologies for that confusion, but I'm glad you clarified that. That is a critical clarification.
Okay.
Rising tide raises all boats, but if your boat's not in the water yet, it's not gonna get right.
All right. That one,
Betty Joe will have to be very sensitive to that because that goes on the classification scheme salaries. So
Okay.
that's into those when they come in.
so Squiremore, we have it, Tamber has it that they would not receive it in odd years and only receive it in even years.
That's fine.
Okay?
Can I ask a question? I'm confused on something. I believe I heard unfilled positions. What do you mean by that?
Like a ghost position, like it's not filled. There's a vacancy.
I mean,
Like no position, there's no, so.
the floor, the starting pay stays the same on odd years and rises on the even years.
So anyone, okay, so the question would be, if an administrative assistant position came over, somebody left this year, and they worked, and normally they get the cost of living after 6 months of work, that they would not get it in this year, then, is that correct?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
It's really not tied,
Okay.
it's not tied to positions, it's tied to classifications.
Yeah,
what you're saying.
so a job at the road department, if it's a $1 an hour job, for instance, it stays a $1 an hour on an even year, but it goes up 2% on a odd year. They have a starting point, $12 an hour, whatever it is. And we typically, when we give raises, it raises that starting point. And that's where we're going into trouble, because employees that have been there for 4 or 5 years are complaining that people are starting at the same salary that they're making now. That's not right. It would create a little bit of distance. It wouldn't be huge, but it would be a distance.
So it's not on positions, it's in the classifications,
Yeah,
and virtually only when it starts, it's
starting
at
pay.
the lowest level,
Yeah,
at the lowest.
yeah. If somebody comes in, they get whatever raises they're entitled to.
Do you
So if
understand, Betty?
if we had someone that started in June, but then in July was an even year and we gave them 2%, and we have someone starting in August, that's not, they're gonna get that 2% if it's an even year. So we're gonna still have the same problem.
You figure it out. That's your job. I just put it out there.
Betty Jo, this is Michael. Yeah, I mean, have you had an opportunity to ask any other HRs in the state? Because this to me seems like it should be a problem across the board.
I would think.
I mean, there's got to be a solution that, I just feel like we're trying to reinvent the wheel. That's just me.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I mean, it's a mess, and it's a mess.
Yeah.
I'll say
And my comment on that, and I think maybe when Rick and Betty Jo and I talked about this, we talked about maybe that there might be an opportunity to collaborate with the SHRM or somebody like that, Society of Human Resource Directors, just to see what else is going on with that.
Yeah.
Because we've tried to talk about it too, and are butting our heads against the same thing. How do you do it in a fair and equitable way that preserves the integrity of those who've signed on and been loyal employees for years, and then you have newcomers coming in the door who you hope you can retain and make them long-term loyal employees. But then when they start leapfrogging, to Squire Moore's point, those who've been on staff for quite a while, it's a challenge. And again, to everybody's point, we're not the only one out there struggling with this. So there may be some good examples in other locations that we just haven't found just yet.
I've reached out to surrounding counties. I've got documents from the surrounding counties. I reached out in 2019 along with the city, and I can send you those documents. What they currently do each year, they do get the CPI at the beginning of each beginning salary and at the end. Unfortunately, what those counties does in the city, they pay for experience and education. So when we start someone off and they've got 20 years experience, we still start them at the very beginning rate. Other counties in the city does not do that. So to me, that's the problem.
No, we don't do it that way either.
The road
If-
department.
We do.
No, they don't. If they hire an operator, he gets more pay than somebody that's not a good operator. They'll start out at more pay.
That is incorrect, Squire Moore. You can ask John Mitchell that. If it is a light equipment operator, they start at the very starting pay. It doesn't matter if they've got 20 years experience.
What about a heavy equipment operator then? That's the guy that's more experienced and he's going to get more pay.
Yes, that is correct. That's a
That's what
different
I'm
grade.
saying.
That's a 4H.
These guys that come in and say they're light equipment operators, they've pushed dirt around with a Bobcat. I know those type of guys. They're not operators.
Squire Tracy, I'm sorry, but we got to
Sorry, they're not.
quick as we could.
All's good. Hey, I know something that hadn't been mentioned today, but was relied on heavy during one of the last discussions in regards to classifications and compensation was the CAECO study that was being done. I'm pretty sure that was going to be used as a reference or a guide as well. So maybe they have some recommendations on how to. But Squire Moore, you got a great memory because the notes I've got, you're pretty accurate on what you're saying.
Thank you.
Betty, you looked at the CAECO.
Yes, I looked at it when it first came out. If you all looked at it, you'll see that they have like 10 to 15 different job titles in each class. They have a administrative assistant along with an office manager. So it's in my opinion, for the county, we're not going to be able to use it because we have a small staff. We're not the state or the city. If you look at it on the website, I believe Sherry Sebastian might have looked at it. She'll understand what I'm talking about. They've got a lot of different titles in with those classifications.
I had suggested at one point that the court create subcategories because we know the reality in this small of an operation is that you really don't have an opportunity for quote unquote advancement. When you're hired at position X, that is your position X, but you could create subcategories that would increase salary based on experience, training, or otherwise. That would not necessarily translate to changes of job duties, but you could have, and to use the example, and by the way, I have nothing but respect for anybody who can operate a Bobcat. The only thing I could do is push one off a cliff if I were lucky. But you might have equipment operator level 1 through double Z.
Right.
And then you could hire in or promote to that position based on training, experience, et cetera, that would be more consistent as opposed to just equipment operator with a salary from $10, $5 to X dollars an hour. But you would give you some internal options that are not currently available.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we had talked about,
Yes,
creating like grades,
great.
like,
Thank you. I had the wrong word. Yes.
right.
Thank you.
And so that was, you might have X heavy equipment operator grade 1, heavy equipment operator grade 2, maybe through grade 5. I don't know. But that's one of the things that we did talk about when Rick and I have been meeting kind of outside of court to talk about these things, because there's still a few things that he and I haven't completed all the way. So maybe between now and the next time we talk about the administrative code, we'll get all that wrapped up and be able to give the court a report on that.
Betty, you did some research and you found a company that's other agencies have been using to work on their compensation rate. Is that correct?
That's correct. Actually, the city contacted me and they had to hire an independent comp administrator to do theirs. Theirs was kind of messed up like ours was several years ago. And they came in and they did an independent comp study and they got them in line. And we will be able to get a free copy of that because I participated with them, with giving the rates and our job descriptions and so forth. And they have offered to come in to help us with this because I agree. This needs to be fixed. I don't know how long it's been like this, but it's a long time. I believe that they would be a good resource for us a lot because the city used them and they said they really helped them, and the Frankfurt Plant Board. I have that information. I will be glad to share that with our compensation committee when we have a meeting to see if they're interested in looking at that. They would even do a demo for you guys And it would be independent, you know, it wouldn't be anybody in-house. They wouldn't be saying, you know, HR is doing this. It would be completely independent. And we would go by their guidelines. And to me, their guidelines is very fair and consistent. I would be happy to bring that to our compensation committee when we get one scheduled.
Okay, well, we'll schedule one. We'll work with Pam and to get one scheduled. It may not be until the first part of July, but can you get this? Can you, Betty, if not tomorrow, early next week, you and Tambra and Pam look at the schedules and see some dates and get some date and call this firm and ask when they would be available, and then we'll work it out with Squire Muller and Squire Sebastian to have a compensation meeting and bring them in, and we'll listen to what they've got to say. Because obviously, as Squire Sebastian said, and Rick Sparks, this is not just privy to the Franklin County Fiscal Court. These are issues that other governmental agencies have to be going through as well. And there got to be some ways to look at it.
Well, Judge, what Sherry said is that's how they address them, is by creation of classifications. When they're limited in terms of promotions, and I don't mean to use the word promotions, but by creating internal classifications, it satisfies the need for flexibility, as well as represent the skills, time, and effort that employees bring to the table. So you're not just cookie cuttering salaries. And that's one we'd really focused on really hard about considering internal classifications within a given internal degrees, categories, whatever, within a given classification.
Great.
As
Great.
part of that, though,
Grades, thank you. Great.
as part of that, where I think they could be helpful would be, what do you base heavy equipment operator 1, 2, 3, whatever? What criteria do you use where one is where you can move from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4? And how do you base it? Is that years experience? Is that certification? Is that both? How is that done? Those are the kinds of questions I think that would be helpful to us as well, not just the classification. And I agree, classifications would be a piece of it, but then there's another piece to that classification fall too.
Judge, I think at that point, that's where the department head should come in,
Yeah.
because they're gonna know
Yeah.
those jobs.
Yeah.
And at
Yeah.
what,
Yeah, they know
Yeah,
what they
that-
got.
yeah.
at what area do they need to be?
Yeah, I
That's
think
left,
that's part of it.
If we could get to that point, that would be.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I think that's part of it. Part of it is would obviously, hopefully would be able to, their input would be important, pertinent to it.
Frankly,
Okay.
I think this is the most important. I mean, it's a critical function of government to ensure that your employees are that public services are addressed by professional employees, and those professional employees are treated fair, et cetera, across the board. And this has led to some really extreme perverse results in terms of salary and compensation. And the resulting morale deficits cannot be overstated.
Understood. So we got planned to on that part. Okay.
So Judge, just to be clear, so you do want me to contact them and
Yes.
let them present this to our
Yes.
compensation committee? I think they will be
Talk to the compensation committee. We'll see what happens from there.
great. I will get that set up. Thank you.
And Betty, also as part of that, let's don't lose sight of doing something with this deficiency that we have here. Okay? You
Yes.
understand? Okay. All right, Squire Tracy, do you have something? Okay. Squire Blackman.
Okay, the one I'm looking at, kind of was an issue of contention at a recent meeting. You look at 30.115,
Is there a page?
page 77, and County Attorney, this is completely in your wheelhouse. I know we discussed this matter, and it came down to us voting, and then after the vote, it being taken completely off the table. So, I spent a lot of time, I read over this, it says prior approval. And in that instance, it wasn't prior, it was after the fact. So I think we need to do something there to where that doesn't happen again. Does that make sense, Rick?
Yeah, listen to my advice when you tell you it's an illegal contract. And it
Which
says
one was
prior,
that,
that is
JW?
prior to the court approving it, I get the final call. It's a constitutional thing.
Page 77, under purchases and contracts, the first item, authorization of county contracts, 30.115. That's where we are.
Yeah, save you from entering into a void or voidable contract. You're welcome.
It was.
I'll do it again if it comes up. I'll do it again the next time it comes up too.
Will you do it before we vote next time?
It says prior, so I did before you voted. I did it prior to approval. I told you for 2 days, y'all, and I'm not going to rehash this. Nobody else wanted to, but I was extremely clear about the deficits of that. I will not approve and rubber stamp things just because everybody thinks it's a really good idea, just for whatever purposes. My job is to make sure the contracts are legal. They set forth sufficient definition to be able to enforce them, that they're fair and equitable to my client, the county, and I will continue to do so. Modify it if you want to, but that's a constitutional requirement, and it's part of my job, and I take great pride in it. And I'll do it again.
I appreciate it. I just want to make sure we didn't run into that again.
Well, the way to run it into is listen to me when I tell you the first time. I told you from the start. I told the members of the committee I would oppose it. I was consistent. I told the reasons, every single thing. I was clear and upfront from the start to the finish.
Okay.
Okay. Squire Sebastian.
Thank you, Judge. Let me ask the court this, and the key member of, I guess the key person here is Counselor Sparks. Would it be possible for you and I to pick back up at some point, maybe next week, and kind of finish from where we started so that maybe we minnow those items down? Is that okay?
I was hoping that Betty Jo would get the homework, but I've got it right here, ma'am. And that's why I said I did not have the
Cool.
opportunity this week with other matters to go back and put like I've got a pen, to go back through these and make those changes consistent with their discussion for consideration.
Right.
Me
either.
And I didn't know what the court wanted to do relative to other factors that you put in. Again, I'm just going to beat this dead horse to death, except for section 5 of your packet. I've got it right here to come back and revisit, to flesh not only those out, but to continue that discussion, Squire.
Well, if that works with you, unfortunately, I've had some personal business I've had to attend to in another part of the state for the last.
Totally understand and respect where you come from. Same boat, different river. Yes, ma'am.
Yep. Okay.
So, but we can still go ahead and
Then
incorporate these things. I can go ahead and deal with that issue about the procurement on the benchmarking it to state law. That's no worries. So you've got some consistency going up into the next budget cycle, and then let the committee meet on whatever we're going to do, or you mean that frog in my pocket, whatever you all prefer to do relative to grades, etc. Because remember, the rule is you review it once a year, but you can amend it at any time on factors as they come up. So I got it right here, man.
And then maybe just you and I will connect, and that way we can simplify the matters for the court rather than to kind of go through all these items that the counselor and I have been trying to go through to winnow that down, so that
I would though recommend that the ones that are definitive, like the procurement. I mean, the one today, yes, I'm pushing that one because I don't want you to get you in trouble with the feds. So listen to me. On the benchmarking, we can do that one as well. It's a simple change without worrying about the comprehensiveness. And if you're talking about that compensation plan, revisions. Do that as a final one with yet a third reading. We're all here anyway. It's just a day in the office.
Well, let me ask you this, the things that you and I've gone through and adjusted in regard to the technical items, you
Yes,
know,
ma'am.
where things were referenced and they were old references, et cetera. Have those already been passed along and that's been incorporated in the codification? So that is already addressed?
The ones that we have met on, no. What the codification did is they updated and eliminated some obsolete languages that referenced obsolete statutes.
Yeah.
But the changes for amendment that we were doing
Uh-huh.
are not present. That was not what they were charged to do.
Okay, cool. But they did take care of some of the things that we covered because there were some things in there that,
Yes, ma'am.
like certain state forms that this references that are no
They're
longer.
obsolete. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
That's correct.
All that stuff. So those things are handled. Some of the other technical things that we talked about, I guess we'll have to circle back as a court, and then these other heavier lifting things. Okay,
That is correct, ma'am.
then we got some work in a little bit to just make sure we cover all of it.
Yeah, but your two, I'm here, the federal procurement and the benchmarking, those we can handle promptly. The next two, I'd recommend that you put them all together with those, with that compensation issues, and just knock those out 3 times. You got a winner.
Okay, well, then you and I can connect out. We'll
Yes,
get some, knock it. Thank you, sir.
I'll hit you up next week.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
Okay, Squire Booth, it's good to see you. Except now we're getting ready to adjourn, and we'll come back at 5 o'clock and be on for our regular fiscal court meeting, work session meeting at 5 o'clock. So
Okay.
we're glad you're here. And we've had it's been a really good discussion, and we're going to adjourn this meeting and come back at 5. Andrew, for those people that are on, what do they need? Like Squire Tracy, Squire Sebastian, Squire Booth, that aren't here, and any of the general public, what do they need to do to come back on at 5 o'clock?
So I will take us after adjournment off of live streaming. And so the general public will need to jump back on the new stream at 5. But as far as the meeting is concerned, I will keep it running. So people can either stay logged in or they can log out and then log back in closer to time, whichever they prefer.
Okay, all right. Everybody got that? So with that being said, we'll adjourn this meeting, and we will come back at 5 o'clock for the work session with the